So over 2 years ago, I made a video about the ships of the fandom of Sonic the Hedgehog, and truth be told, I never expected anyone other than my friends to see it. But a lot of people did see it, and a lot of people liked it, and it inspired me to make more videos in general. And I've often been thinking of other franchises I can make shipping analysis of in a similar vein to my Sonic video. And there was one series that came to mind. Total Drama. Total Drama is a very fascinating show, a relic of the 2000s that somehow has managed to survive to this day. Starting in 2007 and continuing with reboot seasons as recently as 2024, Total Drama is an animated parody of reality TV shows, particularly Survivor, and also teenage media stereotypes. And as a result of this combination, unlike Sonic, Total Drama has a lot of romantic arcs. In fact, Total Drama's romantic arcs and subsequent shipping discourse is something that has become rather infamous even outside of its fandom circles, with a particular love triangle being a source of contention for years now, though we will discuss that later in this video. But with any series that has a large cast of characters, the shipping options are varied and vast. From ships that are definitively canon to wild and weird rare pairs, there are definitely a lot of ships to discuss in this franchise. Despite the questionable arcs and kind of stupid sounding ship names, someone's gotta analyze these ships, so I shall, with the help of a Google form polling the fandom as well. Let's dive into the world of Total Drama ships. Let's start with what is essentially the main ship of the first season. Gwent, aka Gwen x Trent, is the overarching ship of Season 1, and was promptly ruined in Season 2, but that's something we fans are unfortunately very used to. But the point of this video is to analyze why these two are a beloved ship. The seeds for this ship were essentially planted from episode 1, and it continues to grow in the following episodes. These two tended to be some of the more down-to-earth characters in a very kooky show, which helped their chemistry feel more natural. Trent was a chill, positive dude, while Gwen was moody and annoyed easily, but despite her attitude, she found comfort in Trent due to him being a more relatable and artsy person. It was a really sweet dynamic, especially considering how chaotic the show tended to be. Of course, their relationship wasn't perfect. There was quite a bit of strife in Season 1, mainly with two incidents. The first was during the Phobia Factor Challenge. For context, this episode featured every character facing their fears, and Gwen's fear was being buried alive. Trent was tasked with digging her back up, and then ended up getting distracted and leaving her underground for longer than necessary. Ouch. Though if I may go a little bit off script, I don't know why Trent was tasked with digging her back up, because wouldn't that be the job of, like, the people in charge of the show? Because I feel like tasking that with, like, a 16-year-old is kind of like a strange decision. But anyway, that's not important. And while she is understandably quite mad at him for doing that, he does his best to make it up to her. He makes it clear that he is sorry and that he cares about her, and she does appreciate it. Then she catches him kissing Heather like an episode later. Now, to be entirely fair, Heather kissed him and was purposefully trying to break the two up, but this understandably makes it hard for Gwen to want to go out with him by the time of the finale. But in the end, he ultimately proves that he does truly care about Gwen and wants to be by her side, and they get together. It was sweet, and it felt like the show carefully and perfectly built up to the moment where Gwen finally let down all of her walls and was allowed to express her true feelings. The conflict throughout the season was so natural and compelling. I love that a major theme of their relationship involved Gwen, a prickly and introverted character, learning to put her faith in Trent, and Trent having to prove that he can be trusted. It was a genuinely good arc and was completely ruined immediately in Season 2. Yeah, so they very quickly break up after the start of action due to character choices that are just odd. Trent almost immediately becomes jealous of Duncan and Gwen's friendship, which we will discuss later, and not only does he start acting more paranoid, not only does he start throwing challenges to let Gwen win, but then there is the number 9 thing. I genuinely do not know how to explain this from a writing perspective, but Trent becomes extremely fixated on the number 9, incorporating it into everything, Duncan comes to the conclusion that this is because Trent has 5 letters in his name and Gwen has 4 in hers, which equals 9. He eventually explains that this is because of some ridiculous childhood story that led him to believe 9 is his lucky number. But I have a different fan theory. Trent has OCD. I am completely serious when I say this. The only way I can explain this behavior as someone who has OCD is that Trent has magical thinking and relationship OCD. Maybe I will discuss this further if I ever make my video on OCD headcanons and representation. It's really funny to me that Fresh TV made one of the best examples of genuine OCD I have ever seen in fiction, and it was on fucking accident. While Action ultimately sank the Gwent ship in canon, it is still a popular pairing in the fandom, and I get why. This ship was one of the first major pairings in the history of the franchise, so a lot of people grew up shipping it. Despite all of the drama, they were a much more low-key couple, which helped them stand out. And honestly, watching their scenes does make me pretty nostalgic. A flawed ship with a lot of chaotic elements, but still a classic. Now this is a very controversial topic. Duncan is the very famous and infamous ship between Gwen and Duncan. Now, if you haven't actually seen the show, I will provide some context. Duncan is at the center of the most controversial ship war in the history of this franchise. That being the Duncan, Courtney, Gwen love triangle. You see, while Duncan and Courtney were paired together in season 1, their relationship very quickly deteriorated in future seasons, and by the time of World Tour, it was hanging on by the thinnest thread in the entire universe. As a result of this, Duncan started to show interest in Gwen. And though he quits in the 2nd episode of World Tour, he is brought back by episode 13. And at the end of episode 13, one of the most well-known scenes in the whole show plays. The Gwen and Duncan kiss. This would kickstart the Duncan ship. Though it admittedly is a bit of a short-lived ship, Gwen gets eliminated pretty soon after the kiss, and they have absolutely no chemistry in All-Stars, which neatly leads into their breakup. Honestly, some people might be wondering at this point, why would you even pair them up together then? Well, there is a semi-confirmed fandom conspiracy regarding this ship. There's an old interview with one of the main show creators, Tom McGillis, explaining that the network requested that they make these romantic relationships between teenagers more realistic because they didn't want to give kids a skewed perception of romance because, yeah, in all fairness, these kids are around 16 years old. It makes sense that their romantic endeavors would be messy and complex and end badly, which I think explains why they broke up the power couples of Island. And considering the cast and crew seems to have a bit of a bias towards Duncan, I guess I can see why they made the initial decision to pair the two up. I know most of the segment has been me explaining the baggage of this ship, but you gotta understand there's a lot of lore around this ship. But with all this drama, one has to wonder, what even is the appeal of this ship? Well, even as far back as Island Episode 3, the two were shown to be friendly. They both were seen as outcasts, and they had a lot of similar interests. Plus, they were both alternative characters, with Duncan being punk and Gwen being emo. And yes, she is emo, not goth. I know the show consistently calls her goth, but she is not goth. Crimson and Ennui from Redonkulous Race are goth. Gwen is emo. Okay, rant over. My point is, they had a lot of common ground from the start, which is why some people find this more appealing compared to the slower burn of Duncan. Once you remove the love triangle bullshit in the entirety of All-Stars, you're left with a pretty chill relationship between two misfits. I never really was a fan of this ship as a kid, but I understand why so many were. I just wish they had a better story arc. Zoe is the ship between Zoe and Mike and is the main ship of Revenge of the Island. And though it may seem like the most basic ship imaginable, I promise this ship is a little bit interesting. Both Zoe and Mike are introduced as kind of straight man simple characters, with Zoe being a small town shy girl, and Mike is awkward and desperate to be liked. Also, Mike has dissociative identity disorder. Yeah, for those who don't know, Mike, a character in a children's cartoon from 2012, is defined mainly by having one of the most complicated and misunderstood disorders in the entire world. Yeah, so there's kind of a lot to unpack with Mike as a character. Unsurprisingly, his portrayal is not the best. Although, weirdly enough, there are elements of Mike's character that are kind of progressive. While he is largely defined by his disorder, he is portrayed pretty sympathetically and is clearly just an awkward, nerdy kid. And he actually does get a positive romantic arc where it concludes with Zoe accepting him in his altars. While it has aged poorly in a lot of ways, especially taking All Stars into consideration, I do think this is like one of the only times I've seen a character with dissociative identity disorder who actually gets a happy ending romantically, which I think might be a major reason this ship is super popular. It's cute and simple on the surface, yes, but it also is kind of important to a lot of people. And I think these two are just really sweet together. Their romance is a bit rushed, and I mainly blame the 13th episode length for that. But Zoe and Mike are two of my favorite Revenge of the Island characters, so I might just be a little bit biased. I think they genuinely match each other well. They're both awkward and shy kids who develop their confidence throughout the run of the show, and they are also both weird as fuck. I say this lovingly, but neither of them are normal. They both try to be average, unassuming teenagers, but they suck so bad at doing so, and that is why I love them. They aren't the most complex ship, especially when you take away the misunderstanding plot baggage, but they're a personal favorite of mine. Although, I can't make this segment without discussing the fucking Mike amulet. Now, to those of you who have never seen the show, you might be thinking, what the fuck is the Mike amulet? Well, you see, right before Mike is eliminated, he gives Zoe the Mike amulet, which is like a golden medallion with his face welded onto it, and it's the funniest fucking moment in the entire history of the show's romantic arcs. This is meant to be an emotional moment, but the fucking Mike amulet is so hard to take seriously, and I love it. Especially because it breaks 2 episodes later and it makes Zoe become completely unhinged and violent. This is what I mean when I say neither of these two are normal. They are both insane, and so is this fucking show. Now, this is a fun one. Heather, aka Alejandro x Heather, is the best kind of enemies to lovers, and I say that because this ship understands a crucial aspect of the trope. The enemies have a special connection that only they can understand. This ship has everything. It has the drama, the betrayal, the tension, the backstabbing. It's so good. This is the overarching relationship of World Tour, and honestly, it's probably one of the best written season-wide relationships in the entire franchise. While Heather had chilled out by the events of action, she was still not trusted at all. Sure, she was less of a threat now that people knew she was evil, but that didn't mean she was any nicer. And considering the fact that World Tour basically forgets about her genuinely interesting dynamics with Herald, Duncan, and most annoyingly, her newly formed friendship with Lashana, there really wasn't anyone in Heather's corner. Then here comes Alejandro, a new contestant that immediately wins over everyone, including the girls who have boyfriends and the boys. Though he makes it clear to the audience that he is evil, the contestants are none the wiser. Heather, however, is immediately suspicious of him. A manipulator knows a manipulator well. Alejandro had no baggage, no history with the others. He had a clean slate, and he used that to his advantage. He was suave, charming, athletic, cunning, and though it can be argued that he got away with a bit too much when it came to picking off team victory, he still played quite the vicious game, and he did it well. While other characters were kind of suspicious of him throughout the season, Heather clocked him instantly. But it also made sense that no one believed her due to her own history. And while she wanted to beat him in the game, they were also perfect for each other. And she knew this. She tries to deny her feelings throughout the whole season, but she knows he is the only person who can understand her nature. But they're both so nefarious and conniving that it would be hard for them to be intimate and personal with each other, which I honestly love. It makes for a really fun dynamic between villains, and it's part of why Heather is one of the highlights of World Tour, which already is an incredible season. I love how genuinely cutthroat they are around each other. I love this reoccurring theme of facades and appearances, and how there are several scenes throughout the season where it shows them being their honest selves around each other, and only each other. How Alejandro sweet talks multiple girls with phony flirting and pure Chad energy, but is able to woo Heather by matching her intelligence and skill. There are a lot of reasons as to why the ship probably would not work in the context of a genuine, healthy relationship, but honestly, I feel like that kind of setting defeats the purpose of this dynamic. Alla Heather is great because they are simultaneously made for each other, and also they want to be the sole victors in everything. You kinda lose a bit of the fun if you try to water the ship down to a completely fluffy, domestic kind of story. This ship is a constant tango of fiery rivalry, and that is why it absolutely rules. Rajbo, aka the ship between Raj and Bowie, is the first ever canonically queer ship in the franchise, and it's pretty cute. It's honestly sickeningly adorable. It's not the most intricate or dramatic ship in the show. It's a relatively simple ship, all things considered. But I don't think that's a bad thing, especially for the show's first ever queer romance. I really like the approach they took. Both Bowie and Raj seem like pretty standard stock characters at the start, a flamboyant gay man and a rowdy jock, but both of them managed to outgrow their very overdone tropes, mainly by being super funny. Raj and Bowie and their third wheel are genuinely some of my favorites in the reboot cast. They absolutely rule. Bowie seems like a very stereotypical character at first, but he is so charismatic and smart, and I like that he gets to be a little bit evil without being completely demonized, especially considering in the finale, he does kind of have a good point about Millie. And I did not think I was going to like Raj, especially because I don't care much for the dumb Jock characters, but god, he is so funny. While a lot of the other Jock characters utilize slapstick, Raj and Wayne stood out to me mainly by how great their dialogue was.
Records get broken all the time.
So do bones!
Ugh, and candy canes. I hate that. You put them in your pocket, and by the time you—
What are you talking about?
And honestly, Bowie and Raj are a great fit together. They're both athletes with a bit of hidden malice, but ultimately they both care a lot about their loved ones, and it's great to see. Maybe because this was the first canonically queer ship in the show's history, but I feel like the writing of the ship was much more respectful and nuanced than previous pairings. I think part of why Rajbo is so beloved in the fandom is because it pretty much avoids every pitfall of total drama romantic arcs, mainly by having the couple actually communicate and work things out together. Crazy, right? I was genuinely surprised that these two had an honest conversation about their relationship and how the game would affect it, with Bowie wanting to take things a bit slow so the game didn't make things awkward. That was so refreshing! I also really liked the conflict in the second half of the reboot, where the conflict of the game collided with the couple in a believable way and was also resolved in a satisfying way. Plus, I like how they had an arc about cheating, but not romantic cheating. I think that's smart, and it fits a character like Bowie. It also genuinely showcases how a game like this can affect the romantic pairings, which I'm honestly surprised they didn't touch on more, but whatever. I will say this relationship feels a bit rushed due to the 13-episode limit, which still sucks, but the pieces were there for a genuinely sweet relationship, and they made it work. I guess it is a bit of a shame that Rajbo didn't have more screen time as an actual couple, especially considering the currently uncertain future of the show. Oh well, I'm at least happy that the first queer couple was such a genuine and well-written relationship, honestly, one of the best in the show's history. No wonder it's so popular with fans. So, a Pocatello Island ship. This should be interesting. Shasmin is the ship between Sean and Jasmine, and much like Gwent, is the overarching ship of the season. Now, for those who don't know, Pocatello Island is an infamous season, and one major reason for that is the cast. While Revenge of the Island was hated initially because of the new cast, that was mainly because of how sudden and unwanted the change was. It didn't have anything to do with the concept of a new cast, evident by the fact that fans eventually came around to those characters. However, the issue with Pocatello Island's new cast was more complicated. Pocatello Island is the perfect example of how the show began to sacrifice actual characters for gags. Most of the new characters are pretty one-note and exaggerated to a degree that removes part of the appeal of the characters in previous generations. That being that the characters felt so much like real teenagers despite the show being so inherently goofy. And it sucks because I don't even hate all of the Pakato Island characters. I actually kind of enjoy Ella and Scarlet, even though they are some of the most hated in the Pakato Island cast. Although, a general consensus amongst the fandom that I have seen is that two of the better characters were Jasmine and Sean, and yeah, I agree. Jasmine is a pretty nice character, a little generic with her main characteristics being a tall Australian girl, but she is a really good grounding figure in the cast. She's generally pretty friendly and capable, and overall a character I enjoy seeing. And while Sean kind of falls into the problem of having a weird gimmick, his being the fact that he's a zombie apocalypse prepper, yeah, I don't know. But compared to characters like Max or Beardo, he is at least, like, intelligent and helpful in challenges. Even when he's acting paranoid, he somehow is one of the more reasonable characters this season. And between the two Pakato Island romances that were actually meant to be taken a little bit seriously, Shazmin is easily the more tolerable. It's not even a contest. If you know, you know. But, like, Sean and Jasmine actually have a pretty good dynamic, with both being characters heavily tied to nature and survival with inherent leadership qualities. They both are prone to taking charge of their team throughout the season and generally have well-written chemistry. I think it makes sense to pair these two together. While they also argued about stupid stuff throughout the season, when they were on the same page, they worked together really well, both in challenges and as a couple. And honestly, compared to other couple fights in the show's history, their disagreements are pretty tame, especially since they were at least resolved kind of satisfyingly. And also, if you've never seen the season and you're wondering what these arguments were about, I'm gonna be honest, it was really dumb. There's an episode where they're fighting with jousting sticks, and Jasmine decides to throw the challenge so Sean won't get eliminated, and she gets mad that he hits her, and it takes, like, several episodes to resolve this. And then when they decide that if one of them wins, they're going to split the money, but then Chris reveals that Sean disapproved of Jasmine's idea for the money, so she gets angry at him, but then they make up and they're official together, yay! I know I've been a bit critical of this ship, but I do genuinely think that if this season was written differently, maybe a bit more willing to have actual character development that was earnest, and, you know, maybe with more episodes, this ship would be more popular, because it honestly is one of the better parts of Pakato Island. Jock, the ship between Joe and Brick, was one of the most popular Generation 2 ships back in the day, and also it is the ship with the worst name ever. I mean, I get it though, it's either Jock or Bro, yeah, there's not a lot of options. Anyway, the actual ship. Both of these characters are highly athletic and competitive. Very early in the season, they form a somewhat petty rivalry based around them showing off their athletic achievements to each other. Albeit, Brick tends to get injured as a result. A lot. That happens a lot to Brick. But a major factor of their rivalry comes from their different perspectives on being leaders. Brick values teamwork and loyalty and desperately wants to prove himself as a capable leader. However, Joe is significantly more cunning, willing to abandon or trick her allies if the situation calls for it. Not only that, but she views herself as a leader by default, often bossing around her companions under the belief that she is automatically in charge. This opposing energy helped their dynamic stand out, especially since Brick was eliminated because of his moral code, since he went back to save the other team during the challenge. Ultimately, it's a really fun dynamic, and I think it's clear when watching Revenge of the Island that the crew had a lot of fun writing them, and yeah, I can see why. I remember the ship being extremely popular in the fandom around the time Revenge of the Island was new, and though it has lessened in popularity over the years, it still is considered an iconic ship. And what I find interesting is the way the character exploration has shifted. Back in the day, Brick was one of the most popular Generation 2 characters, mainly due to him being a super nice and chill dude. And while he is still beloved, his preferential treatment over Joe was kind of obvious. However, I have seen a lot more appreciation for Joe's character in recent years, and I think a large part of that is because, for many, they have come to see Joe as a relatable, possibly not cis character. Joe is a character who is heavily implied to have some level of body dysmorphia, plus she is a very tomboyish character, It's not hard for many fans to perceive her as trans or gender non-conforming in some way. Thus, Jo has become a more popular character, and more fans interpret the character through a queer lens. Brick as well. I mainly mention this development because I think it adds an interesting layer to these characters and how the fandom views them. Considering so many of us grew up with the show and these characters, it makes sense that our perspectives on said characters and these ships would evolve as well. Jock is not the only example of this, but I think it is a fun one. I will say the ship has a little bit of the girl boss ex-male wife stuff that, in all honesty, I am kind of growing sick of for various reasons, and maybe I'll discuss why in a future video, but I think their relationship is more complex than that. It's less of an enemies to lovers ship and more of a rivals to lovers ship. They're both highly competitive and want to be in charge, and this is a fact that brings them together, and as I am typing this script, I realize these two are really similar to Sonato, which is probably why I kind of like them. Good night. Sam Coda, the ship between Sam and Dakota, is a pretty simple ship on paper. The rich, popular, mean girl and the goofy nerd guy. You can definitely tell the show was made in the early 2010s. But their interactions are actually pretty cute, and if the season had more episodes, they probably would have been an even more beloved ship. It doesn't feel forced, I honestly really like their conversations. I feel like it would have been so easy to make their relationship a generic opposites attract, loser man gets the cool girl with literally no narrative justification kind of relationship, but no. I think they do a good job of making Dakota's connection to Sam engaging to watch. I like that Sam earnestly values Dakota and her opinions and not just her fame and appearance. The arc of Dakota becoming an intern helps humble her and allows for more personal interactions with Sam, and it would have been nice to see more of that, but regardless, the ship is pretty wholesome. Oh right, I forgot to talk about the radioactive monster transformation. So, there's also a very unique quirk of this ship, and that is the existence of Dakotazoid. Halfway through the season, Dakota gets exposed to a bunch of radiation and mutates into a giant monster dubbed Dakotazoid. Yeah, I don't know. This remains in my mind one of the weirdest decisions of the show, and I genuinely remember being kind of haunted by it as a kid. Dakota basically becomes a background character afterwards, and the consequences are never discussed. Like, her dad is constantly mentioned as an off-screen character, and it's implied he watches the show. So, how does he feel about whatever? Honestly, the only nice thing about Dakotazoid is the fact that Sam is really chill about it, and even more in love with her afterwards. Low-key, he was kinda based for that. Sam reappears in All-Stars for some reason, and briefly mentions Dakota twice, so we know they're still together, and honestly, that's such a relief considering how few ships survive past their initial season. There's also a bonus clip that shows Dakota becoming a wrestler after her mutation, and Sam sits in her dressing room cheering her on, which is really cute. I'm at least glad her fate wasn't as grim as Ezekiel's. Despite all of the Dakotazoid baggage, the relationship she has with Sam is generally really nice. It's simultaneously a ship where a rich bitch falls for an average guy, which is always sweet to see, and it is also a ship where an average guy gets to date a cool monster girl. Diversity win or whatever. Oh boy. This is a strange one. Noko is the ship between Noah and Cody, and is one of the most popular ships in the entire fandom, and it has been a popular ship for years at this point. And it all spawned from a single joke. You see, in Season 1, Episode 3, where the challenge is to stay awake the longest, there is a quick gag where Noah wakes up to find himself kissing Cody's ear. Now, keep in mind, this show started in 2007, the joke revolves around the fact that a guy kissed another guy, and this isn't the only time the show makes jokes like this. Obviously, the show has done better in recent years, but I bring this up because it is interesting to acknowledge that this one random joke has defined a huge portion of the fandom. Noko is objectively the Noah ship, even though other Noah ships have become more popular, including two I will touch on later, and Noah gaining a canon love interest in Redonkulus race. Noko is still super popular. Why exactly is that? Well, if you've seen my video on the Spooky Month ship Candy Bats, you might know where this is going. Both Noah and Cody are skinny, young dudes who happen to be two of the most popular characters in the show's history. While Noah had grown in popularity over time, with people realizing how funny he was, and especially with the release of things like Redonkulous Race, Cody is a different story. In fact, Cody has been extremely popular in the fandom since the beginning. So much so that a well-known fan with a Cody doll inspired a one-off gag in action, and it is theorized that the fandom's obsession with Cody sparked the inspiration for Sierra, a character who is obsessed with him. This is fascinating because Cody and Noah were both kind of underdeveloped characters before World Tour, but the ship was extremely popular even before these characters received that development. That ear kiss really was carrying the ship for a while, and I will say, a large part of that fandom definitely came from the way early 2000s fandoms were infatuated with gay people. While we joke about yaoi and fujoshis nowadays with little care, back in the day, those terms had a lot of baggage due to the inherent association between those words and dehumanizing representations of gay men. This is a discussion for another video, but it is worth bringing up here, because there are a lot of examples of people who are not gay men becoming obsessed with the romances of gay men, whether these people were fictional or not. Now, Noko is by far one of the tamer examples of this, but it has been described by fan lore as a Fujoshi favorite for a reason. An interesting phenomenon tied to this ship is the fact that it seems much more popular with younger fans compared to fans who actively grew up with the show. A lot of people who are around my age are more willing to make fun of the ship, but there are still many who ship it. Because both characters are super popular in the fandom, a lot of people use this ship as a jumping off point for headcanons featuring stories of the two helping each other develop. And they do have a bit of a nerdy opposites attract dynamic, with Cody being more extroverted and Noah being the kind of character who tends to go solo. And to be clear, I don't think this is a bad ship or anything, I just feel like its legacy is a little more interesting than the ship itself. This is definitely a ship where the fanon takes the wheel, and that is okay. I'm unsure if this is an unpopular opinion, but Gidget, the ship between Jeff and Bridget, is kind of the best example of pairing two characters together first and then writing an arc around them. I like both of these characters. Jeff is funny and energetic, and Bridget is a pretty chill, down-to-earth character. I think they are a cute couple. On paper. My main issue with this ship is that while they consistently appear post-Island, they don't really do much together. In Island, Jeff develops a crush on her pretty quickly, and they show that Bridget grows to appreciate his eccentric attempts to impress her. The most important moment of their relationship in Island is when Bridget is eliminated by the rest of the guys, as early in that episode they form an alliance due to there being more girls on the island. Yeah, you can definitely tell the show was made in 2007. Jeff admits that he didn't vote for Bridget despite this, and the two become official. They end up being the host of the Aftermath shows in Action and World Tour, which were essentially episodes dedicated to having the eliminated contestants discuss their time on the show. In World Tour, they kind of abandoned that concept though, but that's irrelevant. During the Action Aftermath, Jeff slowly starts to become more of an asshole, culminating in him getting strapped to an electroshock chair by his girlfriend and friends. He admits that he was putting on an act, and all is well until Bridget kisses Alejandro in World Tour. But then it only takes like an episode for them to get back together, and everything is fine again. I feel like I have to mention this ship because it is a notable canon ship, but I definitely think this ship benefits more from fanon portrayals compared to the canon ones. In fanon, it is a lot more calm and lighthearted, which I do appreciate. You have to understand, when it comes to total drama, no one hates the writing of the romantic arcs more than the fans. Out of all the fandoms I've been in, this one is one of the most divorced from canon, and I think Gidget is a great example of that. Because the way shippers portray it, it is much closer to their Season 1 characterizations for good reason. Honestly, the ship is at its best when it's just two dumb losers trying to impress each other, and I can respect that. Liler, the ship between Lindsay and Tyler, is another ship that is not too complex, and I don't mean that because the characters involved are meant to be stupid. Conceptually, this ship is pretty basic. Lindsay is a popular, pretty blonde girl, and Tyler is a jock. It's a pretty contemporary character pairing. While I do enjoy both of these characters, in fact, I think Tyler is kind of underrated, they are also both quite simple. And it does kind of fall into the same problem as Gidget of being more of a background pairing the writers weren't sure what to do with in later seasons. Both Lilar and Gidget kind of feel like ships that you can't find any actual fanfictions for because their tag is cluttered with fics that only have the characters in one scene, and the actual focus is on a completely other ship, and they don't even really act like a couple, and maybe they just mention it once to justify the author tagging it as a ship in the fic when it really isn't, and you're just kind of left annoyed because you gotta filter out a bunch of tags now. Sorry, what was I saying? Right, Lilar. Both times these characters compete in a season together, one of them gets eliminated early. In Island, Tyler gets eliminated super early, which pretty much kills what they were setting up about Heather barring Lindsay from dating him due to them being on opposite teams. Am I the only one who kinda wishes Tyler stuck around longer so that could have been a bigger plot point? And in World Tour, Lindsay gets like amnesia or something because she spends several episodes struggling to remember who Tyler is. Yeah, I don't know. As a result of this, these two don't have a lot of scenes as a couple, especially compared to Gidget, but I think there is an aspect of their relationship that I actually do really like, and that is the fact that they are both super loyal to each other. You know, aside from the amnesia plot point, but it's a really stupid plot, so let's just completely ignore its existence. Even though the other Team Victory girls got eliminated because of Alejandro, and also the fact that Lindsay straight up forgot what her boyfriend looked like, let's all take the time to acknowledge that she never cheated on Tyler. Alejandro was not responsible for Lindsay's elimination. And honestly, that detail makes me super happy, especially considering most of the total drama romance drama involves cheating in some way. Even though it is so obvious that the writers had no real idea for an arc between these two, they are just kind of a cute couple. I like the fact that Tyler gets to see her off when she's eliminated, how clear it is that he genuinely loves her unconditionally, and how disgusted he was during the whole Gwunkin drama because he can't imagine doing something like that to Lindsay. It's just kind of wholesome. This is nowhere near the most intricate or emotional total drama ship, but I do kind of appreciate it because they are genuinely a good couple, and probably one of the healthiest in the show. I just wish they got more screen time. Ozzy, the ship between Owen and Izzy, is a strange case. Izzy is one of the weirdest characters in the show, and I mean this lovingly. I really like Izzy. I think she's really funny, and I like that she progressively gets more and more insane as the series goes on in a way that doesn't feel forced. But I do sometimes wonder, why Owen? Late into Island, Izzy and Owen spend most of an episode together, that episode being Hook, Line, and Screamer, and this episode marks the start of their strange slapstick situationship. I can't even really call this a proper romantic relationship because while they are paired together as an official couple, I honestly found their relationship status more complicated than a teenager's first Discord romance. The other characters occasionally reference the two of them being a couple, and Owen wants to break up with Izzy midway through World Tour. But, like, I genuinely forget that these two are supposed to be together. They aren't really written like an official couple. I don't know if this is just me. Though I should probably explain why people like this ship, as that is what this video is about. This ship is definitely more of a comedic couple compared to some of the others, largely because these two are primarily comedy-centric characters. They are both weird little freaks and they bounce off each other well. You could even say they match each other's freaks. But I guess my point is they work well together because they are both so weird and their weirdness bounces off each other well. And yeah, it's fun because of that. Not the most complex, but it's fun. This is a personal favorite of mine. Lesh Herald, okay, how the fuck do you pronounce this, like, verbally? Lesh Herald? Lesh Herald? Let's go with that one. Lesh Herald is the ship between Lashana and Herald. This is another ship where the seeds are planted from episode 1, but interestingly enough, they never actually get together officially. Despite that, they are still one of the ships of the whole franchise. Herald shows interest in Lashana from the beginning with a very poorly worded comment.
I've never seen a girl like you in real life before.
Excuse me?
You're real big. And loud.
What?
The two don't really interact much throughout Island, mainly due to them being on separate teams. That is until the episode Extreme Torture. Throughout the episode, there is a subplot about Gwen and Bridget finding a poem meant for one of the girls on the island. The poem isn't exactly clear, both in terms of the mysterious writer and receiver, so the girls spend the whole episode trying to narrow down these answers. In the end, Herald gets eliminated, and as he leaves, he confesses to Lashana, revealing that he was the mysterious poet. The two kiss before Herald is sent away. In future seasons, though they have significant interactions, they actually are never together canonically, though Lashana seems to like him back. I honestly think this was an interesting direction to take. One of Total Drama's main elements is his romantic arc, since there are so many happening at once. And for one of the most well-known ships to never be officially together? I don't know, it just fascinates me. But of course, despite the oddity, the ship remains extremely popular in the fandom. I honestly think the best way to describe this ship is that it is literally just the me and the bad bitch I pulled by being autistic meme. Herald is a weird little nerdy freak, and Lashana is one of the coolest characters in the history of the franchise. It's perfect. Though I do feel part of my enjoyment of the ship comes from the fact that in my rewatches of the show over the past few years, Herald has skyrocketed into one of my favorite characters. I think he's extremely funny and shockingly underrated. That's part of why Lesh Herald has remained one of my favorite Total Drama ships ever. I love it. This is an interesting one. Noah is the ship between Alejandro and Noah. In the show, the two don't have too many interactions, at least many significant interactions. In the early episodes, Noah seems to like Alejandro, quipping to him a few times. But in the episode I See London, Noah reveals that he doesn't trust Alejandro. Unfortunately for Noah, Alejandro was listening to that conversation and promptly got Noah eliminated. After that, they have no significant interactions. But in recent years, Noah has really spiked in popularity. I feel as if this spike correlates with the rise in popularity of Noah as a character, which makes sense. You're more likely to reconsider lesser explored character dynamics when you re-examine one of those characters in a new light. Much like Heather, this dynamic is centered around a rivalry turned romantic between two opponents with extreme intellect and wit. But unlike Heather, the ship is more fanon-focused due to less interactions in canon. Though, compared to other enemies-to-lover ships in this franchise, this one is less intense due to Noah being a more down-to-earth and reserved character. Rather than being aggressively competitive, the two just happen to match each other intellectually, which puts them at odds because Noah can see through Alejandro's facade. It also helps that because Noah is so sarcastic towards literally everyone, a lot of people view Alejandro and Noah as compatible characters due to the possibility of an us-against-the-world kind of relationship. With one notable exception. That being Noah's strong friendship with Owen, a character that Alejandro despises. That is a fun element of this hypothetical ship that challenges Noah writers. I personally could never catch on to the ship, but I can see why it became a thing. After all, the children yearn for toxic yaoi. Prilly is the ship between Priya and Millie. These two characters are some of the main characters in the first half of the reboot, and considering they quickly form a friendship, it wouldn't take long for them to become a ship. But it would go deeper than that. You see, Priya's gimmick is that she was raised by fanatics of Total Drama who basically only had her to make sure she wins Total Drama in case it gets a reboot. Yeah, I'm not kidding, that's her backstory. It's pretty messed up when you think about it for like 1 second. She basically has the same backstory as a child star, but for Total Drama. Meanwhile, you have Millie. Millie starts out the show kind of incompetent, with her main motivation being to write a book about the problems with her generation using Total Drama as her research ground. She ends up fixating on Priya due to Priya seeming like the perfect case study of how doomed her generation is. But as the season progresses, Millie realizes that what she's doing is kind of messed up. She acknowledges that judging Priya for her behavior, despite it clearly coming from the way she was raised, was a bad thing to do to a friend, and as a result, she stops taking notes on Priya. Unsurprisingly, Priya eventually discovers this notebook and is reasonably upset about it. And during the finale, Millie apologizes and admits that her actions were sparked by insecurity rather than a desire for real research. This is a nice moment and it leads to the two reconciling. Though Millie is eliminated early in the second half of the reboot, meaning the two don't have many more interactions, their ship is one of the most popular out of the reboot cast due to their canon friendship and nerdy personalities. They also have a bit of an opposing energy, with Priya being more athletic and passionate and Millie being more introverted. And the ship definitely gained more positive attention due to the canonization of the worst romantic pairing in total drama history, Prelib, the ship between Priya and Caleb. And I usually try to be open-minded when I discuss ships on this channel, but I think this sentiment is pretty much agreed upon. Does anyone even actually like this ship? Like, genuinely? It's not even bad because they have no chemistry, they're just boring as hell. Anyway, I've wasted enough time on this ship. My point is, in the wake of the second half of the reboot, better ships for Priya had a spike in popularity, including Prilly. And yeah, honestly, even if this ship never really caught my eye, at least it's better than Prelib. Now this ship is a classic from the Revenge of the Island era. Dot, aka Dawn X Scott, was one of the biggest ships to spawn from Revenge of the Island back in the day. Even though Dawn was a short-lived character, she was undoubtedly a fan favorite. She was unique, she had a cute design, she was really funny.
But it's full of negative energy.
So am I.
You weren't held enough as a child.
And I can't even lie, as a kid, she was my favorite newcomer, and a major factor of her popularity was her enemies to lover ship with Scott. Though I would argue nowadays a lot of Dot shippers are Dawn fans who wish she had more screen time. These two bicker a lot, with Dawn kind of being the only one to figure out that Scott is malicious. Because of that, Scott causes her elimination by framing her for stealing everyone's beloved items, when in reality, Scott stole everything. Despite this, their chemistry was extremely compelling. They were a really funny duo, and Total Drama already had a lot of enemies to lover ships anyways. I see the appeal, not to mention the fact that both characters have a connection to animals, a factor that could potentially lead to them bonding. Scott grew up on a farm, and Dawn can actively communicate with animals. In fact, one of the only times Dawn expresses appreciation for Scott is when he communicates with a mutant beetle. The show is kind of weird. Though Dawn's existence as a character on the show ends with her elimination, she still remains a popular figure in the fandom. The way I wrote that sentence made it sound like they killed Dawn. My point is, Dawn is still a super popular character due to her kind-hearted and softer nature, a factor that contrasts heavily with Scott's entire character. If you haven't gathered already, this fandom really loves enemies to lover ships and also opposites attract ship, a factor that will continue to be relevant as we continue this list. Scare Me In is the ship between Lauren, aka Scary Girl, and Damian. I don't know why the ship name uses her nickname, but whatever. Scary Girl is a strange character to talk about. In many ways, she is such an extreme character that she feels like a scrapped character from Pakato Island. The Gen 4 cast is relatively realistic for the most part, so her inclusion is quite odd. Not to mention her design is a bit distracting in a full cast image. She is also one of my favorite characters in the reboot. Her gimmick is that she is scary. That's why the others call her Scary Girl. She says a bunch of creepy things, constantly enacts acts of violence, and can also randomly break the laws of physics for the bit. I love her. Then you have Damian, who is a straight man tricked into signing up for the show by his friends. I really hope he gets better friends after the show, because why would they do that to him? Though he spends a lot of his screen time screaming and getting hurt, he is a genuinely really fun character. Considering the last attempt to make a normal character, it is kind of a miracle that Damian is genuinely likable. He is both a genuine straight man to the insanity of Total Drama, and is able to be exaggerated and chaotically entertaining. And for whatever reason, Scary Girl seems to have a fixation on Damian, particularly because she likes to torment him. Many people have interpreted this as Scary Girl liking Damian, potentially romantically, and being unable to express it. This fixation isn't really elaborated on outside of Scary Girl liking the sound of Damian's screams, hence why fanfiction expands her character, and also Damian's, but I've mainly seen stuff focused on Scary Girl. My point is, this ship spawned from a desire to explore these characters and their dynamic more thoroughly as a result of their opposing nature. I like this one. Not a personal favorite, but I think it has potential. Scaria is the ship between Scary Girl and Priya. And I will admit, there are rare pairs that are more popular than this one, but if I must be honest, I am including this ship in my main discussion for one simple reason. I actually think the ship is kind of underrated. They have an interesting dynamic that was wasted, and ultimately, a heaping pile of missed potential. These two primarily interact in only one episode, which makes me really sad because I like their interactions and possible alliance. For context, due to Millie and Priya wanting an alliance with one of their teammates and having no better options, Priya attempts to ally with Scary Girl, which does not go well, because Priya is not good at socializing. This continues throughout the episode, ultimately culminating with Scary Girl calling Priya her friend. A development that means nothing for their characters because Scary Girl is eliminated. And then she's the first to go in the second half of the reboot. If you couldn't tell, I think Scary Girl is one of the most underutilized characters in the reboot. Like, I know she's just a gag character, but she fascinates me greatly. Why is she like that? We may never know. But in my heart, she and Priya could have been incredible friends. Priya, personality-wise, is a typical socially awkward teenager trying to figure out what to do with her future, but she is burdened with an insane upbringing, while Scary Girl embraces everything about herself that people find off-putting. I think this ship has a lot of the same appeal of Scare Me In, where Scary Girl is paired with a seemingly normal character, except Priya is more average on the outside, while internally, she can be just as violent and rage-filled as Scary Girl, a factor that I think makes this ship more fun. Anyways, that is my pitch for Scaria. I think it is seriously underrated. Thank you and good night. MK Yulia, which, god, that's not roll off the tongue. MK Yulia is the ship between MK and Julia, and is arguably tied with Rajbo for the most popular ship between the Generation 4 cast. And in my opinion, it's quite understandable. This is the ultimate toxic Yuri, but not because their relationship is toxic, they're just both bad people and their power grows stronger in each other's presence. But that's why people like this ship. In the first half of the reboot, the two were purely enemies. MK was able to figure out that Julia was faking her self-care influencer act, and Julia was able to figure out that MK was spying on the confessionals. This culminates with Julia being responsible for MK's elimination, exposing MK as the one stealing all the items from the contestants. Which is the exact same plot beat that Scott and Dawn had, except MK wasn't framed, and I've never seen anyone mention that, but whatever. However, in the second part of the reboot, they form an unlikely alliance, working together to cheat in challenges, cause chaos, stirring drama, and generally being evil. But interestingly, it remains unclear how much they actually consider each other friends. While it is clear they find some kind of companionship in each other, they are both ultimately selfish at heart. Their loyalty to each other is shown to be tenuous as they are quick to turn on one another, even if there is no benefit in doing so. Ironically, this makes their dynamic more interesting to me. It's honestly one of the most interesting alliances in the show's history. They're not really friends, not really enemies, but much like Alejandro, they have a special connection. Probably aided by the fact that they both put on facades, with MK making herself seem unassuming and unthreatening despite being a genuinely sneaky strategist. And while Julia is also putting on a facade of being unassuming when she is revealed, she revels in how much people hate her. I feel as if these two have an opposing theme of shadows and spotlight, with MK operating in secrecy and Julia being loud and clear about her plans. I think it's a really cool parallel. Overall, this is one of my personal favorite total drama ships. Long live Toxic Yuri. A well-known rare pair in the reboot side of the fandom, Niche Axel? Okay, that's probably right. Niche Axel is the ship between Nichelle and Axel. This is very much a fanon-fueled ship, spawning around the time of the reboot initially airing. Due to Rajbo becoming canon, a lot of shippers were hopeful of more queer ships in the future, with many gravitating towards Niche Axel as a possible canon femme-slash pairing. This is largely due to both characters having an opposing aesthetic and a lot of room for development. Both Nichelle and Axel get eliminated early in the first half of the reboot, and they get more development in the second half. Plus, they seem to be at least kind of friendly with each other in the finale of the first half of the season. See, the thing is with the show, a lot of people who make fun of shippers are like, oh, you just ship these two characters because they so much as stood next to each other. But there are so many times where that just happens in total drama. It's not even that much of a leap. And I mean, hey, Nichelle and Axel are on the same team this time. Maybe there's a chance for more interaction. Oh, Axel got paired up with Ripper, and now her entire character revolves around him. Great. I will try to be nicer to Rip Axel than I will to Priya, because I have discovered people genuinely like this ship, but I do not like how Axel was characterized, and I'm not even alone in this. In fact, I think many Rip Axel shippers might agree with me on this. Like many other pairings in the franchise, their reputation in the fandom is completely divorced from canon. And while some people might ship Rip Axel, but characterize Axel completely differently, others put more focus into non-canon pairings, mainly niche Axel. Like a lot of other Total Drama pairings, this one seems motivated by the desire to give underdeveloped characters more personality, especially since their potential was wasted in the show. Low-key, I think this dynamic could have been fun. At least we have Fanon. Scottney is the ship between Scott and Courtney and is one of the strangest decisions in All-Stars. The worst season objectively. While All-Stars in general is filled with all kinds of disappointing missed potential, one thing the whole fandom agrees upon is that there should have been more development between the first and second generations of contestants. While Gwen develops a pretty natural friendship with Cameron and Zoe, and Duncan kind of bonds with Zoe, the only other significant cross-generation dynamic is the romantic arc between Scott and Courtney. Though, arc might be too generous of a word to describe this. Sorry, I physically cannot stop myself from being mean to the season. Anyways, my point is, this romantic relationship was one of the few times where the generations interacted with each other in a significant way, and for many people, this is one of the highlights of All-Stars, and to be entirely honest, I think this makes some sense. Scott in All-Stars is kind of one of the better characters of the season, being a much more comedic character compared to his Revenge of the Island self, and admittedly, he does have some funny lines.
Courtney, I'm your girlfriend!
And though this relationship is ruined in the end due to what is widely considered the worst episode in the entire show, had this dynamic been written better, I can kind of see a future where it works. Part of why Dunkney was so beloved was it was a ship between an orderly, bossy girl and a rebellious, misfit guy, and I guess this is kind of similar to that, though rather than being punk, Scott is just kind of an asshole from a farm. Well, whatever, still a misfit guy. It's clear Courtney works well in dynamics with characters who oppose her personal controlling energy in a way, and Scott kind of does that. And I guess part of the appeal of the ship specifically is how Courtney learns to appreciate the oddities in Scott, which I guess is nice, and Scott gets to be a loser boyfriend. This ship is definitely one of the weirdest in the show's history, but I am nothing if not open-minded to weird ships. And if you genuinely like Scottney, I salute you. You are God's bravest soldier. This is a ship that has been gaining popularity as of the past few years. Heathney is the ship between Heather and Courtney, and I only have 2 words to describe this one. Toxic Yuri. Heather and Courtney are at each other's throats for pretty much the entire run of the show, which makes sense. Both girls are bossy schemers who desperately want to win every challenge even if it leaves them ultimately hated by the others. Like many other Total Drama pairings, this one revolves around a rivalry-turned romantic, but unlike other enemies to lover ships, these two have much more in common from the start, as I just explained. Plus, it also helps that Heather and Courtney are on the same team in World Tour, the funniest season, and they have some absolutely incredible interactions together, including the forever iconic
I am a CIT!
More like a BITC.
Guys,
I think the ship was definitely aided by how incredible their bickering was in World Tour. In previous seasons, they were definitely enemies, but thanks to being on the same team in World Tour, their relationship was expanded. Plus, both girls have a rivalry with Gwen, a factor that some consider a point for the ship. I mean, in my opinion, the 3 of them could all just hold hands and frolic in a field together, but whatever. My point is, this ship is pretty fun. I think it's good. Also, why were Heather and Courtney so furious in the Shearing Sheep song? Heathera is the ship between Heather and Sierra, and much like Heathney, it has gained popularity in recent years. The two of them kind of form a friendship throughout World Tour and share a few nice moments despite Heather thinking Sierra is weird. It also helps that Sierra is canonically a fan of the whole island cast, though that energy is mainly targeted towards Cody. But it is implied she is a super fan of everyone else, In the first few episodes, they kind of set up this idea of Heather trying to ally with Sierra, though Sierra wanted to manipulate her back as Sierra knew what Heather was trying to do. This doesn't really go anywhere, but it at least set the stage for a possibly fun dynamic. Throughout the season, the two contrast each other's energies, with Heather being sarcastic and calmer compared to Sierra being very emotional. And it is around Sierra that Heather tends to act a little bit more friendly, a good example being when Sierra goes bald and Heather actually helps her out due to her understanding what Sierra might be feeling. As a result of this, I often see art of Heather being able to put down her facades and walls around Sierra, which is actually cute. And I think it is worth bringing up the fact that a lot of the fandom has a desire to pair Sierra up with literally anyone other than Cody, for good reason. And I do notice Sierra is portrayed a lot more, for lack of a better word, rationally in Heathera content. I honestly understand this because conceptually, Sierra is a fine character. She is just uncomfortable in terms of her actual character. Like, I understand why people might like her, but she just makes me very uncomfortable. So it makes sense that she is portrayed as a slightly more hinged fangirl in fan art with Heather. Low-key, writing this segment made me appreciate the ship more. Another win for Yuri. So this ship is quite the loaded topic. Courtney is the ship between Gwen and Courtney. And this specific ship has a lot of context that needs to be explained. As previously mentioned, both Gwen and Courtney had popular ships established in Season 1 that got ruined in future seasons. However, it is important to acknowledge the fact that they actually developed a really nice bond in World Tour, which promptly was ruined by the Duncan kiss. But despite their relationship with each other often being defined by drama and shipping wars, a lot of people really liked Gwen and Courtney's dynamic, myself included. They were both super smart, and Gwen's down-to-earth nature balanced out Courtney's extreme personality. Honestly, looking back, I think part of the reason I could never appreciate Duncan as a kid was because I blamed it for ruining the Gwen and Courtney friendship. I'm not sure why I really enjoyed this dynamic, considering it did not last long, but maybe it had to do with the fact that I was an itty-bitty bisexual who definitely had a crush on Gwen when I was 8, and I really wished I was friends with her. I don't know how those correlate, but I feel it in my gut. Anyway, back to my point. Total Drama, unfortunately, has a bad habit of establishing fun and compelling dynamics and then completely forgetting about them, and Courtney and Gwen's friendship is probably the most well-known, largely because it was sacrificed for the love triangle. But then, there was a glimmer of hope in Total Drama All-Stars. Despite how butchered so many of the characters were, Courtney and Gwen were able to repair their relationship after Gwen dumps Duncan. And then, we were actually treated to a few episodes where the two are total besties, acting way more affectionate with each other and more openly emotional. Can you guess where this is going? Yeah, so the relationship gets destroyed in the worst episode of the entire show, which is a massive shame. But that is where fanon comes in. A majority of Courtney content completely ignores the existence of All-Stars, which makes sense because without the baggage, these two have a really nice dynamic. A lot of Courtney shippers are fueled by a spiteful hatred of canon, and honestly, I think that's beautiful. Gwef, the rare pair ship between Gwen and Jeff, is a ship that formed as a result of a late season episode of Island, that being Tri-Armed Triathlon. In this episode, it is established that Gwen finds Jeff to be super annoying, and it's not surprising she feels that way when you consider how she is characterized in Island. Gwen is super moody, distrusting, and blunt, while Jeff is friendly, loud, and easygoing. In the challenge, the two are handcuffed together and forced to work as a team in the following challenges. During this period, the two actually end up developing an unlikely friendship, with Gwen being able to put down her walls a bit. When Jeff is ultimately eliminated later in the episode, they share a really nice goodbye, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole season. Though they unfortunately don't interact much in later seasons, this episode and this friendship stood out to a lot of fans, both due to how sweet it was, and because the two worked well together in an opposites attract kind of dynamic, with Gwen being super introverted and artsy, and Jeff being an overly extroverted party dude. It's a friendship that could have been expanded upon more, thus, fanon took over. I can't even deny it, I really like this relationship a lot. The episode where this friendship developed is one of my favorite episodes in Island, and it is another horrible example of the show's tendency to abandon interesting friendships. Ah well, at least that's what fanfiction is for, am I right? Zemma is the ship between Z and Emma, and it is a decently popular rare pair. It's one that I have seen around a lot on Tumblr, though I'm not entirely sure where it exactly originated, though that's not too important, because it's become a pretty popular ship amongst the reboot kids. And I think part of why a ship like this is popular stems from the canon relationship that Emma actually has. You see, throughout the reboot, she has an on-again, off-again romantic relationship with Chase, or as I like to call him, Jake Paul Jr., because that is his character. He is an influencer with a massive ego who consistently treats Emma horribly, but she consistently convinces herself that there might be something good in him. Thus, she keeps going back and giving him second chances. It's pretty clear that their relationship is heavily dysfunctional and toxic, though those terms are pretty tame in this context. My point is, this relationship sucks. And so, many fans prefer to ship Emma with someone who won't cut the brakes on her car. Yes, that's an actual thing that happens. I swear, this guy is just Jake Paul too. Because of how chaotic and generally destructive Chase is, it makes sense that Z was a common pick for a better boyfriend for Emma, because Z is chill as fuck. He's a little airheaded, a little unhelpful at times, but generally he's a well-intentioned and kind-hearted guy. It makes sense that a majority of Zemma shippers are people who want better things for Emma compared to canon. Which is really understandable, because Chase fucking sucks. And I think this relationship is sweet, with Z possibly helping Emma calm down and untangle her complex emotions around Chase. I think it's a cute ship. Not a personal favorite of mine, but I like it. I see why it's a popular rare pair. Another rare pair that I have started to see some traction for recently, at least a little bit, Light Sam is the ship between Lightning and Sam. This ship makes sense due to the fact that Lightning and Sam are on the same team and interact a lot. Their friendship isn't super highlighted throughout the show, but it is there, just kind of in the background. Though, to be fair, Lightning is kind of a background character for the first half of Revenge of the Island. He doesn't really become an antagonist until the latter half of the season. But interestingly, it's after that change that Lightning gains a little bit more depth to his character. Lightning starts out the season as a typical egotistical dumb jock with a tendency to fall victim to slapstick, but the finale implies his ego is rather fragile and based around his father's approval. And in classic total drama fashion, this side of him is rarely touched upon. So it's not too surprising to me that someone would want to give him more development and showcase him expressing a more intimate and emotional side of himself. And it makes sense that Sam was chosen as a ship option, both because of them being friends in canon and due to their opposite natures, with Lightning being a jock and Sam being a nerd. Now, this ship has only recently been gaining attention, possibly due to the fact that Lightning and Sam are both kind of unpopular characters, but I think this ship has the potential to become more popular in the future. Let's make it happen, people. I have many thoughts about Noan, aka Noah x Owen. This is a ship that is surprisingly rare in the fandom. Though they had no major interactions for the first 2 seasons, World Tour established them as close friends, and it is a dynamic that is really fun to see on screen. It plays into the trope of big dumb guy who's a comedic relief character, and a small smarter guy who is the straight man. And while it is an overdone dynamic, it works really well because both characters are massively charismatic and funny. Especially Noah, he genuinely carried the first half of World Tour. I think it also helps that by this point in the show, where Noah and Owen became friends, Noah was mainly just a comedic character. He existed just to make quips and sarcastic comments. He didn't really have any significant relationships, so seeing him bond with a fan-favorite lovable goofball was really nice. I feel like this is a friendship no one expected, but it works really well. The characters have good chemistry, their comedic styles mesh better than I expected, and this dynamic quickly became a fan-favorite for good reason. Then Noah gets eliminated the same episode he and Owen are established as friends. Great! But then, in the spin-off show, The Redonkulous Race, the two are pretty major characters. Their bond is expanded upon, and it only raised their already staggering popularity in the fandom. Honestly, despite being a spin-off show, Redonkulous Race did so much for Owen's characterization. While he still feels the same as he did in the first 3 seasons, he honestly feels a lot more emotionally mature, especially in the Finland episode. I love the scene where he encourages Noah to win the challenge for them, showcasing that he genuinely values Noah as a friend and a partner, and earnestly believes in Noah's capabilities. And it's nice to see Noah, such a snarky character, be so appreciative of that support. Both Owen and Noah are fan favorites for good reason, but weirdly, them as a ship is surprisingly rare, and I have a conspiracy as to why. It's because Noah is a twink and Owen is fat. I am serious. Fandoms have a consistent internal bias towards characters who are skinny, and Total Drama is unfortunately no exception. Despite being pretty good in terms of their body diversity, well, at least in terms of character designs, not in terms of writing, in terms of character designs, the fandom still focuses heavily on the skinny characters. I'm honestly more disappointed than surprised at this point. Obviously, this ship isn't for everyone's taste, that's just the nature of any fandom, but it genuinely feels like so few have considered how nice this ship is, which is crazy because both these characters are super popular and their friendship is super popular. This may have been obvious already, but no one is my favorite Total Drama ship by a landslide, which is really funny because Noah has two way more popular ships that we have already discussed, and a canon girlfriend, who I am leaving out of this video because it would be way too long if I discussed Redonkulous Race exclusive characters on top of the Total Drama cast. Maybe in another video, I don't know. But despite those three other ships, this is the ship I got fixated on. Noah and Owen are both funny and likable characters. I think they have way better chemistry than most of the canon Total Drama or Redonkulous Race couples. And honestly, we as a fandom have slept on Noah for too long and I am tired of it. Another Pocketo Island ship, but this one is more fanon in nature. Jasami, aka Jasmine and Sammy, and yes, I am calling her by her actual name, I am not calling her Sammy. Anyway, Sammy is a character who is pretty much abused throughout the whole season, mainly by her twin sister Amy. The only person who really helps her fight back is Jasmine, and the two form a friendship as a result. Though Sammy does not stick around for long, not aided by the 13th episode length, the relationship between the two is really sweet. Jasmine already is one of the few characters from Pocketo Island that I would consider generally well-liked in the fandom, which I think aids this ship. But the main reason this ship is liked is because Sammy deserves something, anything nice. She really does not deserve any of the shit thrown at her. It would be one thing if only Amy abused her, but none of the other characters seem to care. Her abuse is completely tolerated by the rest of the cast despite how unsubtle it is. Jasmine is the only one who notices this, so it makes sense that fans who wanted more for this character gravitated towards her one true friend as a possible shipping partner. Say it with me, shipping is often used as a way to give characters happy endings, and this is a great example of that. Total Drama does have a bad habit of designating characters as punching bags for no good reason, and Sammy is one of the worst examples. I would say a majority of the Just Sammy fans are people who are also Sammy fans who wanted nicer things for her. And as a result, this ship doesn't have the most intricate narrative, but I completely understand why it exists. Hooray for Yuri Copium! Shref is the ship between Chef Hatchet and Chris McLean, the main host of the show. While the ship teeters the line of being a joke ship in the fandom, there are many fans who are genuinely dedicated to this ship. With Chris being the deranged host of the show and Chef being his loyal assistant ranging in matching levels of insanity, Chef is kind of the only person who Chris really has a bond with, and there are a lot of scenes that are unsurprisingly interpreted as romantic. A notable example is the moment where Chef cradles Chris, and to be fair, I don't really know how else that could be perceived. I feel like this ship would be taken a little bit more seriously were it not for the way Chris has evolved into a meme in internet culture. If you somehow don't know, the rise in popularity and relevancy of Total Drama in the last few years has made Chris a very popular figure in meme culture, mainly because he is so insane. My favorite example of this will always be his crimes list on the Villains Wiki. But despite this meme evolution, a lot of people do like it when Chris shows a bit of humanity and isn't just a flanderized cartoon character. And what better way to show his humanity by portraying how he is in a romantic relationship? Or maybe you can make him worse by showcasing him and Chef being evil together. The possibilities are endless. I think it's safe to say it's unlikely that this ship is a fan's ultimate OTP, because the relationships between the contestants are way more complex and ultimately given more screen time. but I figured it was worth mentioning this one. Much like my last ship analysis video, there are way too many ships to cover completely in one video, especially in the realm of rare pairs, so I decided to include another rare pair lightning round as a compromise. Deejin, the ship between DJ and Duncan. Canonically good friends, and DJ is the reason Duncan first showed off his softer side. Chazzy, the ship between Chase and Z. Canon friends with opposing energies. Chase is very sporadic, while Z is very calm. Dustin, the ship between Duncan and Justin. This is mainly based on their short-lived rivalry in action. Lynshana, the ship between Lindsay and Lashana. Underrated canon friendship with Lashana encouraging Lindsay to stand up to Heather. Gwowie, the ship between Gwen and Zoe. Opposing aesthetics, and honestly their friendship was one of the only tolerable parts of All Stars. Ala Duncan, the ship between Alejandro and Duncan. Kind of have a canon friendship with a hint of rivalry. Bon, the ship between B and Dawn. Canon friendship that is super underrated, plus Dawn is able to understand B despite him being silent, which is cute. Damia, the ship between Damian and Priya. Much like Scaremian, it places a straight man character with a very exaggerated character, plus Damian and Priya have pretty good chemistry, and the show kind of jokingly plays with the idea of them as a ship twice. Skella, the ship between Sky and Ella. This ship mainly spawned out of spite towards Dave, the worst character in Pocketo Island and one of the worst characters in the show, though they do genuinely have some sweet interactions together. Linzeth, the ship between Lindsay and Beth. Canon best friends who both were mistreated by Heather and got a lot of development and action. Zemian, the ship between Z and Damian. Chill guy with an anxious partner. Gweather, the ship between Gwen and Heather. One of the ultimate toxic Yuri ships in this franchise because these two have a very long and complicated rivalry. Dave Amy, the ship between Dave and Amy. To quote the Google form, they're both literally the worst, but they get to understand each other and change for the worse. Gidget, the ship between Gwen and Bridget. Canon friendship with a very chill vibe. Lesh Heather, the ship between Lashana and Heather. Toxic Yuri. Also, I'm willing to bet most of the people who ship this are people who are still mad that the writers forgot about them becoming friends in action. Izzy, the ship between Eva and Izzy. Feral girls who love to cause havoc. Gidget, the ship between DJ and Bridget. Very chill ship, they're both canonically friends, and they both love animals. It makes sense. Alejandro, the ship between Mal and Alejandro. Toxic, villainous, yaoi. And now, for our final ship of this video. This is it, the total drama ship of all time, and it is also a massive source of contention in the fandom. Dunkney, aka Duncan x Courtney. Despite, well, everything that has happened, I cannot think of a better ship to end this video on. Dunkney is one of the major ships formed during Season 1, and is built up throughout the first half of the season. From the start, the dynamic is clear. Courtney's stereotype is a preppy straight-A student, and Duncan is the bad boy. It is the most 2007 enemies to lovers ship imaginable, and I kinda love it for that. And let's just say, Duncan was in fact Courtney's weekend lover, not her friend. Though, there are hints and in some cases blatant examples of Duncan's attraction to Courtney throughout the season, their relationship really develops in the episode Basic Straightening. This is honestly one of my favorite episodes of Island for many reasons. It's one of the most charming and character-driven episodes of the whole season, it has great character development for Courtney, and the ending sequence of Courtney's elimination is absolutely wonderful. It, honest to God, still makes me cry. I did spoil this plot point in some of the previous segments, but the two do eventually break up permanently, which I guess makes sense considering how badly Courtney was flanderized in later seasons, but it still sucks. Because their relationship is one of the best developed and best executed in Island. This dynamic was a perfect example of utilizing character development through a romantic arc, because Courtney bonding with Duncan allowed her to feel more comfortable being free and expressing her true desires separate from the rules she placed on herself. Shout out to the boathouse scene, one of the best scenes in the entire franchise. I've made it very clear that a lot of Total Drama fanon content exists in a nebulous AU world where the bad writing decisions never happened, and Dunkney is a great example of that. Sure, if you actually analyze the canon of the later seasons, this relationship is not that great, but the show made us grow attached to these characters in Island, and that initial attachment still holds strong. I guess what I'm trying to say is, Dunkney, You may have had a rocky history, but I will never forget you. So what conclusion can I make about this franchise now that I've analyzed so many ships? Well, much like Sonic, the shipping scene is naturally very chaotic, undoubtedly fueled by the nature of the show itself, but it's still fun. Even with all the shipping wars and love triangles, I love seeing people take aspects of canon and expand on it in their own way. It's one of the best parts of fandoms, and I know for certain, should new seasons of the show be released, I'll enjoy watching whatever chaos unfolds alongside the rest of this wonderful community.